Hey guys, so today we're outside the studio so that we can go inside the studio again. And I have my lovely wife behind the gimbal and camera. Say hi.
Hello.
Okay, so come on, let's check it out. So in this video, we're going to talk about soundproofing, sound treatment, how those two things are different, budget, ergonomics, temperature, and a bunch of other random things about the studio. This is our extra studio chair slash storage box. And this is where I just cram all of my things, and you do not need to see this stuff. But essentially, it's where I put my boxes, my gear, some documents, and of course, our fake plant. I just named it Freddy right now. Hey, Freddy. This is my calendar where I put my daily income, so I'm going to hide that. So one of the most important things about soundproofing is making sure that your room is covered by solid material. Soundproofing simply has to do with making sure that sound doesn't go in and doesn't go out of the studio. So this here is a solid core door, and what that simply means is that it isn't hollow on the inside. Solid wood. On the other hand, this in our bedroom is a hollow core door. Hollow core door, solid core door. Hear the difference? And when you have two of these in your studio, that is going to block out a lot of noise. Now, soundproofing isn't just about making sure that you have the toughest material. You might have the toughest material on planet Earth, but if your studio has an air gap, then definitely sound is going to get to come in and come out. One of the usual suspects for air gaps is your door. And to solve that, here we have a door sweep and a gap filler under the door. Might not seem like a big deal, but these small things make all the difference. Another crucial component of your studio is your walls. Normally, recording studios have two walls with an air gap in the middle. Now, these walls are made of very thick marine plywood. In my old studio, which was fairly soundproofed, the material was much thinner in that studio than the material we used for this one. Now, normally you would have Roxol insulation and some green glue and more layers of walls and a bunch of other things, but that was a little out of budget for us because we were building the studio along with getting this house and preparing for our wedding. But considering that my old setup was practically soundproof considering how thin the walls were, I figured that this would be more than enough. Another big factor to consider is location. Commercial studios tend to need the best soundproofing ever because they're usually located in big cities where you're gonna hear buses and planes and trains and all of these noisy things you hear in the city. But if you're living a quiet rural life with maybe a few noisy neighbors and maybe dogs barking, then you probably won't need that much. But for us voice actors at home, we probably don't have to deal with that as much. In our area, we only deal with kids playing in the streets and a few dogs barking, and that's pretty much it. Now, when building your own recording studio at home, you have to consider your particular situation. In our case, our house is actually a townhouse sandwiched between a couple of other houses, which means that if we don't have the proper soundproofing, the sound is gonna leak from the studio to our neighbors, and vice versa. Which is why when you're building your home studio, make sure to pick the right house. But in all seriousness, if you are a professional voice actor who's going to be doing this for years, decades, 3 decades to come, you should definitely consider the type of house you're going to live in. Now, aside from the walls we have over here, we also have some insulated walls on the short side of the studio. So there was actually a window over here, and that would be the weakest link to the studio. If you can't tell, glass is very thin. So our solution was to get rid of the window, cover it in cement, add an air gap, and add another wall. This is also made of marine plywood, but there's an air gap after that, and there's cement after that. Now on this side, we have 2 layers of thick glass. So is it soundproof glass? No, it isn't. In fact, this glass actually doesn't help with soundproofing. So we installed this here so I could see my wife working in our bedroom, and just to make sure that I can see that there is still daylight outside and that it's nighttime, and it creates a sense of space and community. So to get those benefits, I was willing to sacrifice a little bit of soundproofing. Soundproofing is critically important, but it's not the only factor that you should consider. You might be wondering, why not have bigger glass panels? And the reason is because the bigger the glass panels, the more reflections there are going to be in this room. What I'm referring to is reverb. You ever sing in the shower and feel like, oh man, I sound great in here? Well, for voiceovers, you actually don't want to have that echoey quality to your sound while you're recording. We'll cover sound treatment in a bit, but after I show you a few more things. So we've talked about the doors, the glass, the walls, but what about the ceiling? It is super important and an often overlooked aspect of building a studio. The first time I thought the studio was finished, we didn't have insulation in the roof. But we had the walls, we had the solid core door, and when I was working on my projects, the studio was impervious to 99% of the noises out there, except for rain. Even with typical rain, the ceiling got very noisy. And after we added the insulation, my recording sessions were seamless. With the kind of roofing insulation that we have, the only thing we really need to worry about is intense thunderstorms, which thankfully doesn't happen very often. Now this over here is our floating floor. It's not really floating on the outside, but on the inside it is. There's basically this massive air gap underneath this, and the entire wooden floor is being supported by these rubber pucks. So why is it important to have a floating floor? The same reason that we have a double wall. When building your home studio, you might be thinking, why don't I just create this entire structure built out of cement? Because bass frequencies can still travel through cement if it is attached to the vibrating structure. By adding these air gaps to the studio, we're able to create a room within a room. And that significantly reduces the sound coming in and out of the studio. Remember, sound is essentially the source object vibrating, and then it travels through the airwaves, which also vibrate, and then your eardrum also vibrates. So if there's any way to reduce vibrations coming into the studio, that also helps with soundproofing. All right, now let's talk about sound treatment. This here is a polyurethane acoustic treatment panel by True Wave Acoustics. So polyurethane is apparently the material they use. Some people prefer to use rock wool and things like that, but in my experience, this has been an excellent sound treatment material. It's about 3 inches thick, and to mount it to the wall, we use this French cleat over here, which is like a wooden peg. And it's also got a Velcro strap down here, right there. So the way that goes, all right, I simply put it on top, and the Velcro connects to the bottom. That's why it's so easy to remove or put back. So the main function of an acoustic panel is to make sure that your studio has less reverb or that echoey quality you get in the bathroom. This is essentially a wooden frame, and on the inside they filled it with foam, and then they covered it with this mocha cloth. I believe this is mocha. Now, you might be wondering, is this any better than those foam wedges, those pyramid square thingies that you stick to the walls? I use those extensively, and in my experience, it has far less to do with the form factor of being a panel versus being a foam wedge, and it has much more to do with the material density and thickness. I used to have 2-inch thick foam wedges, but now I have 3-inch thick panels, so I'm not sure that's a fair comparison. Now, an advantage of using these acoustic panels is that a lot of people say that they just look better. Appearance is always a subjective topic, so if you're okay with the look of the foam wedges, or if you don't care about appearances in the first place, then you should be fine with your foam wedges. Personally, I had to consider the appearance of the studio because I knew that it wasn't just going to be a voice acting studio, but also a YouTube studio or content creator studio. And don't you think it looks pretty? One of the most uncomfortable things in my old studio was the fact that it was so hot. It was a sauna. I would always need 2 or 3 pairs of clothes every day when I would record in that booth. So friends, heat, temperature, your comfort in the studio, this is a very important thing to consider. Studio ventilation is a very important consideration. In my old booth, I had this vent that would supposedly suck up the hot air from the studio. And while it was effective to some extent, it was still very hot and the vent was very noisy. It would raise the noise floor of my recordings, and to my ears, they were unacceptable. After that vent broke, I eventually tried this little fan called the Opolar 9. And while the fan was a bit more silent and provided a bit more cooling, it was still not as cool or as silent as I wanted the studio to be. And that's where this baby comes in. Given that we're using a shotgun microphone to record the AC right now, I have a feeling that it is picking up some of the fan noise. But if we turn the mic the other way, I have a feeling that the noise floor would go down significantly. And now we're pointing the shotgun mic away from the AC, so this should be significantly quieter. Just a disclaimer that it is not standard practice to have an AC unit in the actual recording booth. But I have been to a lot of studios that do this, and what they have in common is that the AC is far away from the microphone. Other factors you have to consider are the sensitivity of the microphone and the pickup pattern. So this here is my Neumann U87. It's about 5 years old at this point. It normally goes for about $3,600 as a set with the shock mount, but thankfully I was able to find one used just 3 times for $2,000. This is the kind of microphone you're going to find in many professional recording settings and is considered one of the most beloved industry-grade studio microphones. If you're just getting started with voice acting at home, this is probably overkill. Honestly, I only got it because it was practically 50% off. This did become my dream mic, because when I was just starting out as a voice actor, one of my mentors was hyping it up for me, and it was like, "Dave, you see that? That is a Neumann." And I was like, "Whoa, Neumann, gotta have one of those." I even put it on my dream board, and now here it is, and I've been using it for the past 5 years. The Neumann U87 is very sensitive. If you raise your gain and blink in front of it, it can actually hear you blink. Of course, it's not plugged in right now. So if the microphone is sensitive, but there's AC running in the background, how does that work? Well, for one, the Neumann has a cardioid polar pattern, and what that means is that it's got this heart-shaped kind of a field of capturing sound. So because I know that it captures sound this way, and I don't point it at the AC, then that's one way of reducing the AC's noise. So I only ever record with a Neumann like this, with the diaphragm or the microphone's eardrum facing towards me, and I make sure that the side is pointed towards the AC. If I wanted maximum background noise rejection, I would do it this way, having the back facing the AC, but that wouldn't be very practical considering the way my workspace is set up. Another reason I can record with a Neumann U87 here with the AC in the background is because I do very loud character recording work. The louder your actual recordings, the better the signal to noise ratio. What that basically means is because I'm already speaking loudly into the microphone, I don't have to raise the volume of my voice. So that also means I don't have to raise the volume of the background noise. Now here is my Shure SM7B. This is not typically considered a voiceover microphone. It's usually used for singing and podcasting. In recent years, it's become very popular with YouTubers because of its exceptional ability to block out any background noise. That's because it's a dynamic microphone, whereas the Neumann is a condenser microphone. The SM7B also has a cardioid or heart-shaped polar pattern like the Neumann U87, but the intensity at which it does that isn't as much because it's a dynamic microphone. I have actually been to a couple of studios that use the SM7B as a voiceover microphone. I've also found that it's very useful for applications such as AVPs, corporate training, and commercials. Whereas most of the time I do use my Neumann for animation and also some commercials. I still use my Neumann most of the time, but I don't want to overwork it and break it, so I got the SM7B so that it can take a few breaks. There are also these rare occasions outside, like when there's construction going on or there's a thunderstorm, and that's when I switch over to my SM7B. It's pretty handy in a pinch. This here is my Motu M2, which has been serving me rigorously for the past couple of years. I might upgrade it soon, but so far my clients have been very happy with the results I get with it. This is my DBX286S. I just got this a month ago, and to be honest, you probably don't really need this. My only real use case for this is to improve the quality of my voiceovers when I'm streaming. It also offloads the burden of post-processing your audio from your computer. And again, ultimately it's just a very nice thing to have, but more than likely you probably don't need it. This here is a Rapu mouse. Nothing fancy, but the main feature I got it for is that silent clicking. So here we have my dual monitor setup, which is pretty simple. I have a Windows computer over here. It's an Asus G15, and I mostly got it for the graphics card, but to be honest, I was perfectly fine with my used, refurbished ThinkPad X250, which is by no means a high-performance laptop. Here I have my lapel monitor, which is just a monitor. So the way I use this is fairly simple. I have my script over here, I have my digital audio workstation or recording software down here, my microphone over there, and I record while reading the script kind of like this. This is not the final mic placement, but that's for another video. Sometimes if I have to sync my voice to some video or animation, which is what we call dubbing, I would have the video up here and my digital audio workstation down here, and I would have the script either accessible via Alt-Tab, changing tabs, or I would divide this, having the script over here and the digital audio workstation over here. Depends. Honestly, this is already an upgrade for me because back then I only had a tiny 12.5-inch monitor and I had to do all sorts of work on that. So I'm really, really grateful to have all this. These are my GT770 Pros, which are high-fidelity, hi-fi headphones. Keep interchanging those. So when choosing your headphones, you want to consider what application you're going to be using it for mostly. And in my case, I'm using it for monitoring my audio, which is simply making sure that I can listen back to my voice live. Make sure your monitor headphones are closed back. That's in contrast to open back headphones, which usually would have grills over here, and they kind of act like semi-speakers. Their audio would leak from the headphones out and into the microphone. But with closed back earphones that clamp onto your head really tightly, none of that sound is going to escape and leak back into my microphone. I especially love the GT770 Pros because I don't think there's any other headset that I've used that's been this ergonomically designed. These velvet ear pads are so comfy and they don't even touch my ears. So they're classified as over-ear headphones because they go over the ear, rather than on-ear headphones, which kind of squeeze your ears. And I'm like, why? Why would you design them to be like that? A heartfelt thank you to my brother-in-law, Mark, who sent me this beautiful headphone rack that matches the skin of my table. Look at that. I probably should have invested in one of these a few years ago, but I'm stingy that way. Look at that, it's perfect. Ta-da! Okay, let's put that away. Normally I put these headphones over here or maybe just on the table, but yeah, don't do that. This here is my Ulanzi tripod. It is made of carbon fiber, I believe. It's very sturdy. I think I got this for about $60. It's tiny, but it's built like a tank. This is where I mount my camera when doing talking head YouTube videos. Look at that, you can do this, neat little trick, and it folds away. But I actually hardly ever use it this way. Most of the time it just sits in this corner of the table where I marked some Scotch tape. And that gives my videos a more consistent look. There. The tape's right here, but you're not supposed to see that. Over here is my little trusty IKEA bamboo phone dock that I can just put there and put my phone there and Ta-da! And this coaster from Nespresso, even though I really don't bring food and coffee into the studio. Just water. So we have this massive Godox fill light over here, or key light rather. And you turn that on. Ta-da! Massive light source. Much more flattering for my face, and this is what I use for all of my talking head YouTube videos. So you might be wondering, wouldn't a light this big affect the acoustics of the studio? Definitely. So on the bright side, get it?
Whoa.
Bright side. On the bright side, it's completely covered in fabric, so it's actually adding a bit of reverb reduction to the studio. If you touch the softbox, you can see that it's completely made out of fabric. It's not perfect though, because this studio light definitely introduces some fan noise, and we can listen to that right here. Hear that fan noise? We can at least pan this video so it looks smooth and you forget that it's pretty noisy. Which is why I still turn it off when doing actual voiceovers. But obviously I need that light for YouTube and for streaming. Which is why when I'm recording my YouTube videos, it's the back side of the microphone that's pointed towards the light. Remember, polar pattern. And that's why knowing your polar patterns help. Polar pattern. If you want to learn how to produce great sounding voiceovers that book you work, go to dave.voiceactorsathome.com/audition-ready-audio. Once you're there, click Get Started Now. And on the checkout page, click Have a Coupon? And enter the code DS100 and click Apply. And with that, you get $100 off the course while also supporting this channel, so it's win-win. Now back to the studio tour. And as you can see, this pin light over here is embedded into the acoustic panel. Look at that. It has 3 color temperatures. You have white, you have warm, you have warm white, which is combining them, and white. I guess you can call this a cool white. Can we talk about the AC again? Because I can spend days here without breaking a sweat. Just to illustrate a point, I can wear a jacket in a studio, whereas in my old studio, I wore Sandos. Of course, a studio wouldn't be complete without a trash can. Let's not talk about that. I wanted to show you that we have 4 sockets over here, and these were just added to the double walls, the wooden walls that we have over here. And we have 2 more sockets over there where the studio light is. Obviously, cable management is a real concern, so when planning your studio, you should definitely consider your ports, your hubs, and all of those wires. But as for me, I'm perfectly fine with hiding them in places where the camera normally doesn't look. I'm having a vulnerable moment here. This is just a brandless desk that's not even made of solid wood. This is actually steel. And this is a fiber-like material. The studio has a hidden feature that I haven't used for a long time. Well, it's not really hidden because it's in plain sight. Let me show you. Lighting. More lighting. We have a nice blue over there and red over there. And these are actually the cheapest, most budget-friendly lights that I could find when I was designing my previous studio. This is a simple white light with some frosting over it and some blue gel. The other one has red gel on it. I got this pair for about 20 bucks. And because it's actually so cold in the studio, I gotta pretend that it's hot with this nice, shiny fireplace. Delayed reaction, no one's gonna believe me. That's horrible acting. Look at that, nice and cozy. You're gonna find this in the corner of some of my YouTube videos. Special shout out to Kuya Alvin, my cousin-in-law, who got us this for Christmas. And this is my mechanical keyboard from Royal Kludge. I've had this for the past year, and it's very sturdy, very reliable. And yeah, it's got all these nice colors. I can change the colors. Right there, it's the light patterns, kind of a blue there. Different colors. I haven't really used these features in a long time. There we go, that's nice and glowy. Yeah, it's just a nice feature to have. But the real question is, can you type fast with it? Let's put it to the test. $149. Not bad, I guess. As for my chair, really nothing fancy. This is your typical office executive chair. And I just got some lumbar support for some added comfort. Here we go. I can do this all day. Another small but important detail about the studio is the Ethernet cable. So they actually drilled a hole through the wall right here at this point, and I actually kind of regretted being there because had I known that it would look like that, I would have told them to hide the hole behind one of these panels. Now that it's there, I just kind of have to live with it, but thankfully I have this amazing ability to pretend that things are pretty, despite their brokenness. Having an Ethernet cable in your studio is crucial if you want to have that stable internet required for live recording sessions. If you have the best audio gear, but a shoddy internet connection, your directors still won't enjoy working with you. All in all, for the studio itself, without the gear, it cost about $4,000. About a third of that went into the panels, and the rest of that went into materials and labor. My previous booth cost about $600 to make. There were a lot of things that this studio was giving me that the previous studio could not. That booth was about a third of the size of this one, so it was a little claustrophobic. It was also very hot, which meant that my working hours would be limited. I love voice acting, but I literally dreaded going into that booth every day. And with this one, I never have to think about that. Another one is the improved lighting. It is fantastic. I think it's great for my eyes. The previous one probably ruined my eyesight. This one is also quieter overall. It has much better soundproofing, and I could go on for a week undisturbed. In my old studio, I had to tell my entire family to keep quiet. But with this one, my wife could at least have regular conversations with people downstairs. So the soundproofing here is definitely better. The sound treatment, though, is comparable to my previous setup. That booth was completely covered in foam, and my audio was practically dead. Here I would say about 90% of the reverb is dead, and we still have 10% of the reflections remaining. Is it better or worse? For me, it's just a matter of preference. Just some final thoughts. Your home studio might be better than some studios, but not as good as others. But what matters is that you build a setup that is appropriate to your current means and situation, while making sure you can produce the best possible audio and have seamless workflows. While there are industry standards in commercial studios, those were established in a commercial setting, and usually cater to workflows involving the director coming in and watching from another room, which is why the mixing room tends to be separate from the vocal booth. But if you're the only person who is going to be using the room, why not consider just building one room? While AC may introduce a pinch of noise, I'm okay with that, if it means being able to work unlimited hours in my studio and not suffering. Factor in a few other things like ergonomics, temperature, and brand aesthetics. Let it be an expression of your personality. It's your personal studio. So make sure that it's a studio that you would love to work in or sleep in. If you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, check out this other video where I talk about air conditioning.